Good evening. I know that there are many familiar faces out there that I can't see, but for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Margaret Miller. I'm the Director of College Counseling. This is my 6th year in this position at SCA. Our second college counselor, Dr. Paula Garrett, will join us for a question and answer session next week on Wednesday, January 20th at 6:30 p.m. We wanted to give you the opportunity to watch this video and to look through the materials that your daughters will receive in their red folders this week before the Q&A session. You can send us any questions you might have ahead of time by email or simply register with Dr. Garrett to attend the event. Her email will appear at the end of this PowerPoint. I'm always excited to kick off the college search, but as some of you may know, I'm especially excited this year because my own daughter, Augusta, is in the class of 2022. For the first time, I'll experience this process as both counselor and parent. It should be interesting. Before I begin, girls, I want to say that I know you're all in different places right now. Some of you have siblings who have gone to college and you've visited a number of campuses already, while others don't even want to hear the dreaded C word quite yet. And that is perfectly normal. No matter where you are, I promise you that this time next year, all of you will have received college acceptances, and some might even know where you'll be heading in the fall of 2022. So, how do we get from here to there? The first thing we need to do is establish proper roles. This process is a team effort, but it's the student who needs to take the lead. The best college application experiences are those in which the student takes ownership and responsibility. Using a sports analogy, the student is the competitor, the counselors are coaches, and parents are both facilitators and cheerleaders. Yes, parents, you will be responsible for most of the cost, and you are the ones who know your daughter's best, but she's the one who will be spending 4 years at the college. Juniors, remember that this is your process and ultimately your future. You'll need to devote ample time and effort to have the best outcome. The second thing we need to do is clear away some of the myths that surround this process. As we embark on this exciting phase in your lives, it's important to remind yourselves that you will all have a lot of choices. In spite of what you might hear in the media and the anxiety that sometimes surrounds this process, the reality is that approximately 90% of the roughly 4,000 colleges in the U.S. accept over 80% of those who apply. Let me repeat that. Approximately 90% of the roughly 4,000 colleges accept over 80% of those who apply. The diversity and excellence of U.S. colleges is mind-boggling. In fact, our colleges are regarded as the best in the developed world. Your job, then, is not so much about getting into a college as it is about learning how to make a good decision when there are so many choices and so much information to wade through. This process isn't only about finding the right college. It's also about learning how to take initiative, make informed decisions, and take responsibility. The more effort you put into this, the more prepared you'll be for all of the decisions that you'll need to make once you get to college. The only way to go about this process without feeling overwhelmed is to take it step by step. We're here to outline those steps and to guide you along your way. I promise you that this process is manageable and can even be fun if you do things in the right time frame rather than waiting until the last minute. And the fact is, whether you realized it or not, you began this process 2.5 years ago. Here at St. Cecilia, you've been engaged in rigorous college prep classes. You've been exploring your interests and had many opportunities for leadership and service. You've already been exposed to many colleges, whether at our fairs, the Catholic College Fair, or a big fair when you were 9th and 10th grade, and morning visits, whether in person or in this past year virtually. And whether or not you liked it, you've already had to take your share of standardized tests, having taken your PSAT in 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. But now, in the spring of your junior year, the process becomes intentional. The three most important things that you need to accomplish this semester are honest self-evaluation and reflection, the creation of a big list of colleges to research, and preparing for and at least hopefully partially overcoming the hurdle of standardized testing. The impulse might be to start looking at colleges first, but that's not the best way to go about it. The process needs to start with you. In the coming months, you'll hear us speak a lot about fit. And what do we mean by that? There are three components to a good fit college: academic fit, social fit, and financial fit. College is not a prize to be won, but a match to be made. I like this quote because it captures the idea that college isn't about the sticker on the back of your family car, but it's about finding the campus where you'll be happy, thrive, and best prepare yourself for a successful future and good life. Just as SCA has been a place where you've been preparing for college, the best college experience is one that equips you to excel after college. Oftentimes, the campus where that will happen will be a brand name. But that's not always the case, and that's why we need to start with self-reflection and determining your own unique criteria. Let's remember, college is primarily about academics, so academic fit should be at the top of your list. You'll need to think about what kind of a student you've been at SCA. What are your strengths, your weaknesses? What classes did you like best? How do you like to learn? Listening to lectures? Engaging in hands-on projects? Group work? Presentations? Do you feel comfortable being in the middle of the pack, or do you need to know that you're among the top students in your class? Colleges will offer a range of possibilities. Some offer co-op programs in which you'll spend entire semesters working at a job as part of your education. Others might teach only one class at a time. Some don't even give grades. While you create your big list, you'll need to take some time to answer these questions. We'll discuss those answers at length in our individual meetings. Of course, college is also about residential life, the social experience, and having some fun. Do you want to be at a school where everyone knows your name, or do you want to blend into the crowd? Do you want to attend giant sporting events or participate in smaller gatherings? Does city lights call, or do you prefer the great outdoors? There are many, many options. This part is all about you, and you should enjoy learning more about yourselves by taking assessments, clarifying your strengths and weaknesses, and establishing your goals. We've provided a number of resources for this part of the process in your red folders. The 10-step campus culture quiz. I often tell students to think of themselves as anthropologists. Each college campus is like its own culture, and you'll need to explore that to discern whether or not you'll fit in and if you've found your people on that campus. The 15-question survey answers or asks you some basic questions about location, size, what kind of social life you're looking for, Greek life, sporting events, etc. You've already taken the U-Science assessment, which is both an aptitude and interest assessment that gives you a good list of possible careers that could be a good fit for you. This would be a good time to go back and look at those results. College Board has a great survey where you can check off different criteria, and we'll spit out a big list for you. Colleges, some you may have heard of, and others will be new to you. And we have a junior survey, which you can find on Naviance, or in English class, we'll hand out a paper copy that you can work on. The last component of fit, financial fit, is the part that's not as much fun. And it's the one that's become more and more important as the costs of college have escalated. This is where parents have to step in. Having a discussion about finances early on in the process helps us to lead you to colleges that are affordable for your family. It's a good idea to identify what kind of financial aid will be best, whether that's what we call merit aid, scholarships that are performance-based rather than income-based, either for academics or other talents, or need-based aid, or possibly a mix of the two. In 2012, a law was passed that obliges colleges to include a net price calculator on their websites. Some are more accurate than others, but families can get a ballpark idea of what to expect. As students begin to create lists of colleges, parents should use these calculators. The calculators that ask the most detailed questions will be the most accurate. A good one should ask questions about your daughter's academic performance, her GPA, test scores, etc., and more searching financial questions. Once the girls have determined what kind of college would be the best fit, it's time to look outward and only then begin research on the colleges themselves. Where do you start? One of the main purposes of our individual meeting with the girls is to help them craft their big list. At this stage, we're focused on possibilities, and we don't want to get too narrow. Later, we'll talk about strategy, but for now, we're focused on the big picture, and it's important to keep an open mind. Take advantage of the many resources that we offer. Look at the college websites, their programs, majors, etc. Attend virtual tours and events. One of the good things that's come out of COVID is that colleges have done an amazing job of providing virtual resources that can give you a good sense of what life is like on the campuses, including many student panels. Talk to reps, perhaps in person in the fall, if not, again, virtually. College fairs, there's another one coming up mid-January. I believe students should be able to register for college fairs that will take place in February. Talk to your college counselors. We have lots and lots of resources in the College Counseling Center. There's an excellent guidebook called the FISC Guide, which is a great place to start. Again, this is a big list. We're talking about 20 or 30 schools that might fit. And visit in person if you can. So this year, even during COVID, some students were able to visit colleges. Tulane, Villanova, Ole Miss are some of the schools that I know our seniors visited. I anticipate that more will open in the spring and the summer, to be determined. If you're lucky enough to be able to visit, and those visits will be restricted, it will be mostly out of doors, make sure to register for a tour and information session. Colleges keep track of that. It's part of what they call demonstrated interest. Connect with our area representative. If our rep is there in the office, it's a good idea to let them know, ask for that person if they're there, and come out and say hello, help them to connect the face with the application that might come down the road, and then walk around on your own. Some of the tours, as you might know, are marketing tools and scripted, but you'd like to look around, see what the students are doing, get a sense of the vibe of the campus, and see if that could be a good fit for you. Look at postings on bulletin boards, hang out at a coffee shop, and make sure to write down your impressions. In the handbook that the girls will receive this week, we have a college visit summary sheet. As you go through this process, you might find that colleges start to blur, and it's good to write down the impressions right away so that you have a way to jog your memory later on in the process. So, once the girls are building their lists, and only then should we really start to look at the process from the college side. What are the colleges looking at when you submit your application? The transcript is always going to be at the heart of any college application. Remember, college is mostly about academics. Your grades, 9th, 10th, and 11th for juniors who apply in the early cycle, including your senior course selection. And every student is looked at within the context of her school. So you're not going to be compared to schools that may have fewer or even more AP courses to select from. You'll be looked at within the context of the opportunities that you had here at St. Cecilia, the rigor of your schedule. If an admissions rep were to look at our school profile, he or she would immediately see that students here are required to carry a minimum of 7 courses, 28 credits for graduation. We have 18 AP classes and a passing grade of 70, for instance. St. Cecilia is a rigorous high school. Questions that an admissions officer might ask are, did she avail herself of the most challenging classes available to her? Do we see an upward trend in grades over the course of her high school career? Testing. I'll speak about that in a little bit more detail later, but our advice is to start prepping now. Many colleges are test optional at this point, but we know that some of them will return to testing requirements for your class in the fall. Essays. Notice that that's in plural. All of you have heard about the mythical college essay. That's the main essay for the Common Application, typically. But colleges will often also ask for what we call supplemental essays. These are shorter essays, maybe 100 words, 250 words. They ask questions such as, why us? These essays are more important than students sometimes realize, and you have to take care in answering them. They're not looking for cut and paste answers to these questions. Sometimes they can be quite creative. The University of Chicago has always been famous for unique questions. Other times they'll ask you to give more details about an extracurricular activity that's important to you. Your English teachers will help you with your Common App essay. We'll begin working on drafts of those in the summer, and you'll have the opportunity to get feedback, and it will be an assignment for a completion grade for your senior English class. We spend a lot of time helping the girls brainstorm and looking at different drafts of those. Mostly the college counselors will be looking at your supplemental essays to help you with those. And some girls may not have any of those, and others might have quite a few. Extracurriculars, this is a way, along with the essays, for the colleges to know who you are. What do you choose to do in the time that is your own? That's not when you don't have things that are required of you, like coursework and homework. So these two things, essays and extracurriculars, can really tell your story. It can become part of your narrative. We'll spend a great deal of time helping the girls complete their activity section of their Common App and figure out the best way in a small amount of space to include those activities. The extracurricular part and leadership is a real strength here at St. Cecilia. I'm always very impressed when I see the girls' resumes and their activities lists. They've had wonderful opportunities to exercise leadership here in our smaller all-girls environment. Teacher recommendations, the colleges want to know who you are as an academic. What kind of a participant are you in the classroom? Do you speak a lot? Do you lead discussions? Or are you more observant? Are you a strong writer? These kinds of things are important. Demonstrated interest. That's one of the jargon terms in the world of admissions. In order to understand why this might or might not be important, we need to discuss another term, which is yield. Yield is that percentage of students that accept an offer that a college extends. So a school like Harvard, a hyper-selective college, might get 86% of the students that it offers admission to. Pretty high, probably one of the highest. But there are always those students who might go to Princeton or Yale. If they're able to get into Harvard, they can usually get into a couple other hyper-selective schools as well. Typically, schools have much lower yield numbers, and these are numbers that schools guard, focus on, and try to raise every year. This number is included in the 7-number formula that determines rankings for colleges. So all of this is to say that some schools will keep track of demonstrated interest and others don't have to. But for those that do, whether or not you visit the school, if it's a virtual visit, a visit in person, whether or not you open your emails that they send to you in great volume sometimes, is something that they're keeping track of and will help them to determine your interest when it comes time to look at your application and decide whether or not to accept you. So these are things that you have to pay attention to. I compare it often to a marriage proposal. So they're looking to see that you're going to say yes before they propose to you. Other factors that come into play: legacy, whether or not a family is full pay, diversity needs that a school might have, and recruiting athletes. Now, how much each school weighs each of these factors depends. Every school is different. They're all looking for different things. Different schools, different priorities. It's hard to generalize. Admissions, especially at the higher end schools, are what we call holistic. That means they're looking at the whole picture, not just your numbers, not just your grades and your test scores. It becomes quite subjective. It's neither an art nor a science. For instance, a school like Notre Dame typically has 1 in 4 spots for legacies. Another school like the University of Alabama, although sports are big, actually only has about 2% of athletes on its campus, whereas a school like Amherst College in Massachusetts, a smaller school, has 36% of their spots for athletes. Again, different schools, different priorities. Once we get to senior year, we'll start to think a bit more strategically before you submit your applications. But at this point, we're looking at the big picture when it comes to your list. We need to make that ultimately a balanced list, which means that you'll include target schools where you have roughly a 50-50 chance of acceptance, likely schools where you're in the top 25% numbers-wise, and these are the schools where you can really do well with generous merit aid. In fact, every year we have a student or two who's able to get a scholarship that is a total cost of attendance. In this year's senior class, one of our students just received from Indiana University a scholarship that includes everything: room and board, books, and tuition. Reach, far reach schools. We define a school as reach if it accepts fewer than 30% of applicants. These schools can be really unpredictable, and sometimes the strongest students can be deferred or even denied from schools that they considered more of a target or a safety school. We'll talk about all of that more later. So what you need to ask yourself, girls, as we put together these lists: do I have the grades and scores? And parents, can we afford it? Again, look at your net price calculators. What will I study? This question is very important, but perhaps not as much of a factor as you think it is. Most students, the colleges tell us, will change their majors 3 times. And there are typically ways of picking out courses that will suit your needs. So for instance, if you're thinking about business, perhaps you can become an economics major at a smaller liberal arts school. You won't necessarily have to find a school that has a business track specifically. Here's our quick facts sheet that you can find in your handbook. This will help you as you're putting together a list and figuring out whether it's balanced, which schools are target, which schools are reach. There's cost for parents, deadlines, etc. Speaking of reach schools and far reach schools, it's helpful to look at some real numbers. I actually found this on a junior night presentation from another Catholic high school up in the Northeast in this case. And the numbers are daunting. Approximately 72,000 valedictorians and salutatorians in the United States. Some schools have even started to give that designation to more than one student each year, and there are roughly 36,000 high schools across the country. 19,340 spots for Ivy League freshmen. Of those spots, a full 40% will be for special cases, 20% for athletes, and 20% for those groups we talked about before: legacy, minority candidates, donors, and VIP. That leaves just 9,670 seats for everyone else. More real numbers. 40% of Georgetown's class of 2024 was ranked number 1 in his or her class. 50% of the Duke and Northwestern classes were admitted ED, and that's a binding early decision agreement, typically due November 1. It means that you would have to withdraw your other applications before you might even know if you're accepted and won't be able to weigh financial aid offers. And even within that 50%, which looks like a very promising number, you have to understand that those recruited athletes, minority students, VIPs, and donors are often included. It's a very competitive pack. 82% of applicants accepted to UGA are Georgia residents. So when our girls apply to UGA or North Carolina, Chapel Hill, you have to understand there are very few spots that have been allotted to students from out of state, making competitive colleges that much more competitive. And since 2015, the numbers of 31 to 36 ACT scores have doubled. So these numbers are daunting, but they're not meant to discourage you, simply to put things in perspective. We want you to know that there are many other high-quality colleges that are not Ivy Plus that will be well regarded when you look for a job or apply to grad school. There are many reasons why some schools are more selective than others, and it's not always or even typically about the quality of the education. So what does all this mean? The process is not always predictable or entirely fair. It's not about finding the perfect school, but many great fit schools where you could be happy and succeed. When you hear about disappointment, it's most often experienced by the most competitive applicants. And now that's not to say that we want to discourage you in any way from applying to these highly selective colleges. In fact, a good college process should involve some denials. It's healthy to aim high and to stretch yourselves. In fact, a couple of years ago, 2 professors from Princeton University released a study that showed that career and income outcomes were almost identical for students who applied to super selective colleges, whether or not they were accepted or even chose to attend. The fact that a student would have enough confidence to apply to one of these schools indicates a level of drive and ambition that will serve her well in her life. Success, as we know, is much more about personality than drive than it is about where you go to school. Admissions officers like to tell us at the highly selective schools that if they had it to do over again, they could fill their classes with students that they denied, and there wouldn't be any difference. There are countless reasons why a student might not be accepted to a college. That school might be looking for a tuba player or for students from a rural area, and you're a violin player from the city. We don't always know what goes on inside their offices, and remember, this is holistic admissions and a very subjective process. This past fall, a great book came out which discusses this process at Emory and Davidson and the University of Washington. Highly selective schools, especially Emory and Davidson, by an author named Jeff Salingo. The book is entitled Who Gets In and Why. I'd suggest for those of you who are interested in applying to the highly competitive schools to take a look at that, parents as well. It gives you a very, very good sense. It's a transparent book which offers a lot of good information about this process. So again, studies show that it's not where you go, but what you do when you're there. The engagement, the academic programs that you choose, internships, and of course the friendships that you make. Testing, that big hurdle that we have to go over. You'll get it started in the semester. Some students, by the end of junior year, have already achieved scores that they're happy with, but the vast majority of girls will continue to prep and test right up until the applications are due in October and even in December. So as we build our list, we'll have to clear this hurdle. Right now, as you know, during COVID, testing is optional at the vast majority of colleges. But if you're able to take a test, unlike the class of 2021, and adequately prepare, presenting positive testing information can work in your favor for both admissions and for merit aid scholarships. So SAT versus ACT, how do you decide? These tests used to be regional. Now there's more or less an even split, and colleges will take either, so you don't have to submit both. Test prep tutors tell us that there's about 70 to 75% overlap of material. What are the differences, and how do you decide? The SAT consists of a math, reading, and writing section with an optional essay. You have 3 hours for 154 items plus the optional essay. Test prep tutors tell us that this test requires more test savvy. The SAT was traditionally more of an aptitude test. A few years ago, ACT started to garner the majority of the testing market, and they changed their tests. So the two tests have become a bit closer. The ACT, you'll see an extra section. It's reading, writing, math, science, and that optional essay. A little less time with many more questions, 215. The questions are straightforward, at least a little bit more so, but it's fast-paced, more like a school assessment. Traditionally, girls did better on the ACT than the SAT because they tend to focus more on homework than boys do. But since the change in style and format of the test, of the SAT, we've seen an uptick in girls who actually prefer and do better on the SAT. We'll be holding an in-school ACT on March 30th, if you've already registered. This is the first time we're doing that because of the test closures due to COVID. Test optional. Before COVID, there were roughly 1,000 test optional schools, and since then, we've just stopped counting. Some of them have gone test optional for just 1 year, and others for 3. More have gone permanently. It remains to be seen for the ones that have gone for 1 year in this fall or even in this summer to see what they announce, depending upon the success of vaccinations, etc. So back again to the choice between ACT or SAT. Some students will prepare for both continuously up until the time of submitting their applications, but others, and this is what we tend to recommend for most students, will focus on one. If you can take either diagnostics for both of those tests or sit down and take the actual tests and come to us, we'll use something called a concordance and compare your scores. Sometimes students do roughly the same on either test, and then it comes down to a preference. Some students like to have more time for the reading section, and for that reason the SAT can be their preferred test. But others like the fast-paced test, and will do better on the ACT. As far as the writing, our best advice is to go ahead and take it unless you know for sure that you don't need to. There are very few schools that are requiring the writing section, but a number of them continue to recommend it. And in the world of college admissions, recommending for students at private high schools really means close to required. So our best advice is to look at the essay as an opportunity to shine. Most of our girls do well on the essays. They're good writers. They tend to do very well on the verbal sections altogether. Many colleges will do something that's called super score. So what that means would be, for instance, a student could have a super score of 1,400 on an SAT after taking it 3 times, never having achieved a 1,400 on any one test. The schools will take your best verbal score and your best math score out of those 3 tests and combine them into a new composite. The schools will do the same for the ACT. So we strongly recommend test prep. Different types work for different students. There's online free Khan Academy test prep for the ACT, but we see students improve on both when they do that. Some students will work with a tutor Whatever works for you and fits your family budget. We've seen students increase their scores dramatically by the time they get to the fall of their senior year. Ideally, students would have 2 or 3 tests done by the spring. This will help us with our list building and deciding which schools are your targets and which ones are your reach schools. It's important to remember that students must send their scores to the colleges. SCA does not do this, and in fact, what we tell the students mostly is to guard your scores. Wait until you see where you are in the fall so that you send only your highest scores to the colleges. Lastly, SAT subject tests. These tend to fall through the cracks. Sometimes they're called Sat2 tests, and these are for specific subjects. They're 1 hour long, and you can sign up to take these on the dates typically that the other SAT, the general SAT, is offered. Our recommendation is to take these in the spring. Now, not every student will need to take a subject test. These are mostly recommended for the students that are applying to the most competitive colleges. They used to be required at a number of them, but again, they're recommended, they're still recommended at many, and recommended really means that you should at least try. If you don't do well, you don't have to turn them in. If you're studying for an AP class in the same subject, that would be the best time to take the subject test. Now, the tests are not equivalent, and some of the teachers have even told me that the subject test can be trickier and a little bit harder. But you should go for it. Speak with your teachers, speak with us. We can talk about that more. Not every student will need to consider taking the subject test. Naviance. Here at SCA, we're fortunate to have the college counseling software called Naviance. Now, Naviance can be used for different purposes. Students and parents, you both have accounts. This year, students will need to reset their passwords to get on, and I'll be doing Naviance training sessions during lunch to be announced. Parents, some of you will already have an account if you've had an older daughter who attended SCA. And for others, you'll find your activation codes in the red folders that will go home with your daughters. During junior year, Naviance is mostly a research tool. Students can put in the colleges that are on their big list and can use a feature called Compare Me. That allows the girls to see how they might fare compared to other SCA students who have applied to the same school in years past. Another great feature is rep visits. Colleges sign themselves up for those morning visits, whether they'll be virtual or in person in the fall. They'll certainly be virtual still this spring. And you'll see a list of those colleges when you go to the opening page of your Naviance account. Senior year, you'll be activated in what we call eDocs, and then Naviance becomes a communications hub where you can request that we send your transcripts, and then we send those supporting documents along with your transcript. So for now, it's a great tool for research, both on colleges and on yourself, because it includes a number of good assessments beyond the ones that we're giving you in your red folders. Parents, please complete your junior parent survey. You'll find that on Naviance, and we'll also send a paper home copy with your daughters if you prefer that. This is really essential for us to best help your daughters, especially if we can read your input before we have individual meetings with her this spring. So, how about some concrete tasks for all of you to focus on in these upcoming months? First and foremost, bring up your grades or continue to achieve high grades if you've already been doing so. As I mentioned, the transcript is at the heart of any application, and your 9th and 10th grade grades will be included, but junior year grades will be the focus of the colleges. Select rigorous senior classes. Remember that question, has this student availed herself of the most challenging courses available to her? Increase your involvement and your leadership. Read your college counseling handbook. You'll be receiving that this week, and it includes a wealth of information, including a calendar to let you know everything that you can expect in the months and year ahead. Girls, complete your junior survey. Before meetings is best, because that way we can focus our time and best use it The more effort that you put into your junior survey, the more that we can help you find the best fit colleges for you. In addition, we sometimes use quotes from what you've told us in that survey to relay to colleges. We include those in our college counseling letters. Meet with Mrs. Miller. I'll be meeting with all of you this spring and work on that big list. Later in the spring, we'll have a common application workshop during the school day in the morning of April 28th while the younger students take their CLT exams. You'll be asked to make teacher recommendation requests by May 1st. During our individual meetings, we'll talk about which teachers will be best to invite. Continue to prepare for and take the ACT and SAT, and over the summer, you'll write your first draft of your Common App essay. All of this should keep you plenty busy. Summer opportunities. I typically suggest to students that they find summer opportunities that will allow them to explore their academic interests more in depth. Many of these pre-college classes are undecided so far whether or not they'll be virtual or in person. Some of the applications are already open, and it can be a good way to explore interests that you don't have the opportunity to take in depth while you're at school during the school year. We have all sorts of requirements that look a lot like the requirements of students at those 36,000 high schools across the country. So summer opportunities can be a good way to distinguish yourself, explore potential college majors, and really take a true and deep interest further. Some students will have summer jobs, which is also a very valuable thing, which can indicate discipline and responsibility. It'll help you pay for some of your expenses during the school year and save for college. Volunteer work, of course, more and more volunteer opportunities are opening as we start to have vaccines. The one thing you don't want to do is just hang out in the summer. The Common App activities section includes summers as well, so it's nice to have something to fill in there. We have a list of good summer opportunities. Some have been recommended to us by St. Cecilia families, so please don't hesitate to come and talk to me about those. Final words of advice. Don't get stuck on one dream school. Be open to new ideas. Always ask for help. Enjoy high school. Don't let this become your full-time job. Senior year will be your last year of your experience here at St. Cecilia, and we want to make sure that you enjoy it to the fullest. And remember, God has a plan for you. College is simply one step along the way. I look forward to seeing you again in our question and answer session next Wednesday. Please don't forget, if you have any questions based on this video or the materials that we send home with your daughter, to send them to us in an email. And if you haven't already, please register with Dr. Garrett. Here's her email. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.